In July 2011, the bodies of Daniel and Claire Whitmore, a newlywed couple from New York, were discovered in Suite 417 of the Ivory Sun Resort and Spa in Cape Town, South Africa. What should have been a dream honeymoon turned into a scene of silent horror. Both were poisoned, spending their final moments in agony. The investigation into their deaths revealed a shocking past, unraveling a complex web of betrayal, obsession, and revenge. In June 2011, days before the wedding, a woman from Daniel's past, Amelia Carson, reappeared, a woman who had been left behind, forgotten. But Amelia was not willing to be erased from history. The events that led to that fateful night began 3 years earlier, in 2008, when the relationship between Daniel and Amelia took shape. A relationship that over time would transform into a spiral of deception, heartbreak, and finally, a murder plot. On the morning of July 10, 2011, the Ivory Sun Resort and Spa awakened to its usual routine. The golden rays of the African sun stretched over the white sand, waves whispered against the shore, and newlyweds, still wrapped in the magic of love, rested under umbrellas, sipping cocktails. But in Suite 417, time had already stopped. It was 8:45 a.m. when there was a knock at the door. The cleaning staff had the task of tidying the honeymoon suite, as they had done the previous morning. Receiving no response, the employee assumed the couple was still asleep. It was common for newlyweds to lose track of time, caught up in the excitement of the trip and the comfort of a carefree vacation. But something about the silence behind the door didn't feel right. She knocked again. Nothing. At 8:50 a.m., she decided to use the master key. As soon as she opened the door, the first thing she noticed was the stillness, a dense, suffocating silence that had no place in a location meant for celebration. The air was laden with a strange mixture of expensive cologne, wine, and something metallic. Then her eyes fell upon Claire Whitmore. Claire's motionless body was the first image that shattered the illusion of a perfect honeymoon. She was slumped over the edge of the bed, her blonde hair falling over her face, barely grazing the white carpet. Her skin was a ghostly pale. Life had faded into a waxy, unnatural tone. At the corner of her lips, a stain of dried blood contrasted disturbingly with the soft pink lipstick she had worn the night before. The employee's breath caught in her throat. Her instinct screamed at her to run, to leave, to pretend she had never opened that door, but her hands moved before her mind could process the horror. She reached for the hotel phone and with trembling fingers, dialed the emergency number. Her voice broke as she tried to explain what she had found. Her body was shaking so much she almost dropped the receiver. She knew this wasn't something that could be undone. What had happened in that room had already left its mark. At 9:25 a.m., South Africa's Major Crimes Unit arrived at the scene. Detective Lucas Vandenberg had seen his share of tragedies over the years, but something about this crime scene felt different. There was a chill in the air, an unsettling feeling that told him this wasn't a crime of passion, not an impulsive act of fury. This was something more, something calculated, something deliberate when he entered Suite 417. His trained eyes analyzed every detail. On the nightstand were 2 half-filled glasses of red wine, their crimson liquid now clouded by a strange residue. On the room service tray remained a half-eaten plate of seafood, the untouched portions now giving off a subtle smell of salt and decomposition. A chair was overturned on the floor. And then there was Daniel Whitmore. His body was found in the suite's bathroom, collapsed on the cold marble tiles. His legs were in an unnatural position, his face frozen in an expression of agony, as if he had fought against the poison coursing through his veins. His fingers were clenched, as if in his final breath he had tried to cling to life. Beside him, a broken bottle of South African Pinot wine stained the floor with deep traces of red. Detective Vandenberg had seen death before, but this scene gave him a chill in his stomach. Everything was too clean, too orderly. There were no signs of struggle, no forced entry, no evidence of a violent fight. And yet it was clear that this was a double homicide. Forensic specialists moved through the room collecting samples. By a.m., the initial toxicology results confirmed the worst suspicion. Cyanide, a lethal dose in the wine, in the food, in the blood of both victims. There was no doubt this had been planned. But on July 12, 2011, the case took an unexpected turn. Security footage from July 9 at p.m. showed a woman entering the lobby of the Ivory Sun Resort. Her face was partially hidden by a wide-brimmed hat, and she carried a small black purse. She didn't approach the reception desk. She walked determinedly through the lobby, casting a fleeting glance toward the elevators before disappearing from the camera frame. That woman was Amelia Carson. Detective Vandenberg played the recording over and over again. Nothing made sense. Who was she? Why was she there? There was no record of her name at the hotel. She hadn't booked a room or registered as a guest. Yet she was there just hours before the newlyweds died. And then the most chilling discovery. Amelia Carson wasn't just any woman. She was Daniel Whitmore's ex-girlfriend. Her name appeared in old phone records, in past travel itineraries, in financial statements from years ago. Their romance had begun in 2008 and ended abruptly. Amelia had been left behind without confrontations or explanations. Daniel simply erased her from his life when he decided to commit to Claire. But now she had found him, and this time she wasn't going to let herself be ignored. By July 13, 2011. The search for Amelia Carson had already begun, but there was a problem. She had disappeared without a trace. On June 25, 2011, Daniel and Claire Whitmore were under the majestic oaks of an estate in the Hamptons, surrounded by the laughter and applause of 200 guests. The sun was setting on the horizon, gilding the perfectly manicured gardens, while a string quartet played softly and champagne flowed endlessly for all present. It was a dream wedding, the union of two successful and beautiful people embarking on a perfect life together. But Claire didn't know that. Just 12 hours earlier, her brand new husband had been in a dimly lit hotel room in Manhattan, wrapped in sheets with a woman who still believed she had his heart. Amelia Carson had spent almost 3 years believing Daniel was the one. Their relationship had been an exciting secret, built on stolen weekends in luxury hotels, whispers on calls at odd hours, and the promise that someday Daniel would choose her. But that illusion began to crumble in early 2011, when Daniel became distant. Excuses became more frequent. Meetings ran longer than usual. Messages went unanswered. Then, in June of that year, everything changed. Daniel confessed that he was getting married. Claire was the woman he had chosen. Amelia had been a mistake. But on June 24, 2011, the night before his wedding, Daniel called her. He told her he had doubts that Claire wasn't what he really wanted, that he needed to see Amelia one last time. She went to meet him that night in a high-rise hotel overlooking Manhattan. They drank expensive wine, whispered about the future, and for the first time in months, Amelia felt that she had won. But by dawn, Daniel was gone. He blocked her number, deleted her messages, and walked to the altar to promise Claire the rest of his life. For weeks, Amelia tried to understand what had happened. She called him, emailed him, waited for an explanation, but all she received was silence. Then, on July 6, 2011, she saw it. A photo posted by Claire, smiling and radiant next to Daniel on the beaches of Cape Town. The caption was simple. "Forever starts now. #, Whitmore Honeymoon." And in that moment, Amelia broke. By July 6, 2011, Daniel and Claire were already settled into their honeymoon routine at the Ivory Sun Resort and Spa. Their days passed between private yacht cruises, wine tastings, and candle-lit dinners on the sand. It was paradise, but Daniel had no idea that Amelia had arrived the day before. She had checked in on July 5th under a false name, Veronica Daniels. She had flown with a one-way ticket and carried only a small black suitcase. She wasn't there for the beaches. She wasn't there for closure. She was there for revenge. On July 8, 2011, Claire unknowingly sealed her own fate. That night she posted another photo, this time from the resort's private beachfront restaurant. The sun was beginning to set, bathing the white table with a rosy glow, 2 half-empty wine glasses and Daniel's hand resting on hers. The caption, "The happiest night of my life." #, Whitmore Honeymoon. The moment Amelia saw the post, something inside her broke forever. She spent weeks obsessed with every lie, every false promise. She relived every caress, every whispered "I love you," only to realize that none of it had been real. She had been discarded. Erased, as if she had never mattered at all. She wasn't going to let Daniel forget her. On July 9, 2011, Daniel and Claire had their last dinner. The Ivory Sun Resort offered a private dining experience reserved for newlyweds who wanted a night alone without interruptions. Daniel had arranged everything. A bottle of South African Pinot wine, a selection of regional seafood, artisanal chocolates with vanilla. It was a perfect night. But Daniel didn't know that there had been a 5-minute window, a moment when the food was left unattended in the suite before being served. The hotel kitchen staff later confirmed that they did not re-enter the suite after delivering the food, but someone else did. At p.m., the first signs of distress began. Guests in the adjacent suite claimed to have heard violent, uncontrollable coughing. It lasted several minutes, followed by a strange noise like a gurgle. Then silence. At a.m., Daniel staggered to the bathroom. He never came out. When the cleaning service arrived at 8:45 a.m., it was already too late. Claire was found first, her body hanging off the edge of the bed, her eyes open and fixed on the floor, her lips slightly parted, stained with traces of dried blood. Her fingers, cold and rigid, still clutched the sheet, as if she had tried to get up before the poison overcame her. Daniel was in the bathroom, his face frozen in an expression of agony, his body slumped against the tiles. The broken wine bottle lay beside him, the deep red liquid mixing with the white powder of the poison that had killed him. It was quick, efficient, relentless, and Amelia Carson had already vanished. By July 12, 2011, the world already knew the names of Daniel and Claire Whitmore. Their death became international news. A wealthy couple, newly married, poisoned in their honeymoon suite. Their dream trip turned into a nightmare. But at the Major Crimes Unit in Cape Town, the detectives weren't following a story. They were following a killer. For Detective Lucas Vandenberg, the case had been disturbing from the beginning. There were no signs of forced entry, no stolen objects, no clues suggesting the intrusion of a stranger. Whoever did it calmly, with precision. It had been too perfect. The forensic report confirmed the worst cyanide poisoning, a dose so lethal that death had been inevitable. The poison wasn't just in the wine, it was also in the seafood. That meant whoever did it made sure that both would die without exception. Then came the security footage. At p.m. on July 9th, a woman entered the lobby of the Ivory Sun Resort. She didn't hesitate. She didn't doubt. She walked straight across the marble floor, casting only a fleeting glance toward the elevators before disappearing from view. She carried a small black bag, her face partially hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. That woman was Amelia Carson on July 12, 2011. She was officially named the prime suspect. By July 16, 2011, the investigation had already captured international attention. Media in the United States and South Africa followed every lead, speculated about who Amelia Carson was, why she had followed the Whitmores to Cape Town, and above all, where she had hidden after the murder. Then the first concrete lead appeared. Security footage from Cape Town International Airport showed Amelia attempting to board a flight. She wasn't running or showing signs of panic. It wasn't the attitude of a desperate fugitive. Instead, she was methodical. Her hair had been dyed 2 shades darker and pulled up in a high bun. Her passport, registered under a false name, seemed impeccable. She almost made it, but something went wrong at the final checkpoint. A routine scan detected an irregularity in her identification. The system detained her for 90 seconds, enough for her to realize the danger. Before authorities could detain her, she disappeared into the crowd in the terminal. By the time agents searched the airport, Amelia Carson was gone. On July 18, 2011, at a motel on the outskirts of Cape Town, a guest caught the attention of the establishment's owner. She paid in cash, avoided eye contact, and carried only a small backpack. She stayed in room 204, and for 2 nights no one saw her leave. On the morning of July 18th, a cleaning lady entered to provide the usual service. She expected to find a messy bed, perhaps clothes strewn about. Instead, she found the woman still there, sitting in complete darkness, with her hands resting on her knees. She wasn't sleeping, wasn't watching television, just sitting. The employee apologized for the interruption, but the woman barely reacted. When asked if she wanted the room cleaned, she simply shook her head with a slight, almost lifeless movement. The encounter disturbed the employee so much that later she mentioned it to her boss. At 9 p.m., the motel owner saw a news report about the Whitmore case. He immediately recognized the face from the sketch of Amelia Carson, but when the police arrived at room 204, it was empty. On July 20, 2011, the last clue appeared. A transaction at a hardware store in Johannesburg showed that a woman, who matched Amelia's new appearance, bought scissors, hair dye, and a pack of blank identification cards. She was preparing to disappear permanently. The clerk at the store remembered something strange. The woman barely spoke. She just pointed to the items, slid the money across the counter, and left without waiting for change. It wasn't the behavior of someone planning a new life. It was the behavior of someone who had already given up everything. On July 22, 2011, a worker at a hotel in Johannesburg, someone who had been following the case closely, noticed a guest who seemed too familiar. She was staying at an Airbnb on the outskirts of the city. She had registered under a name that didn't match any known record. She didn't go out during the day, didn't order food. When the police arrived hours later and broke down the door of her rented room, they found her just as the motel employee had days before. Sitting in the dark, she didn't try to flee, didn't protest, didn't ask why they were there. She just looked up at the officers with a blank expression. Her only words as they put handcuffs on her were, "He promised me forever." By April 2012, the world had already decided who Amelia Carson was. The story of the Honeymoon murders became a media obsession. A tale of love, betrayal, and revenge, too twisted to be real. News outlets broadcast special programs, true crime forums analyzed every new detail, and journalists crowded the courtroom, waiting for the moment when justice would be served. In the cold gray walls of the Seattle Superior Court, Amelia sat motionless, her expression unreadable. The same face that once smiled in old photographs with Daniel Whitmore was now that of a woman from whom everything had been taken. The trial dragged on for months. But on April 10, 2012, the prosecution presented its final blow. They exposed the meticulous planning of the crime, how Amelia had purchased the cyanide in her hometown, making sure there was no direct connection to the murder until it was too late. Receipts from a pharmacy in downtown Seattle showed she had acquired the poison 6 weeks before the Whitmores arrived in Cape Town. The date of purchase February 28, 2011. Long before Amelia knew when or where the honeymoon would be, that meant it hadn't been an impulsive outburst or a moment of madness. It had been a decision made with full consciousness. The security footage from the Ivory Sun Resort was played for the jury. The exact moment when Amelia Carson entered the lobby on July 9, 2011 at p.m., she walked with confidence, with a clear purpose, with her small black bag in hand. Definitive proof that she was there just hours before Daniel and Claire were found dead. The most damning testimony came from forensic experts. They confirmed that the poison had been mixed with precision, ensuring it would take effect only after the victims had ingested most of the food. It had been a perfectly timed execution, slow enough that they wouldn't notice anything on the first bite, but lethal enough that when they felt the effects, it was already too late. Daniel died in agony. Claire died trying to reach for help. Amelia had made sure neither would survive. On April 25, 2012, the most decisive moment of the trial arrived. The jury's deliberation. The room was full, but the tension kept everything in absolute silence. Daniel's parents, Richard and Evelyn Whitmore, were in the front row, holding hands tightly, waiting for a verdict that would never bring back their son but might give them some peace. Melissa, Claire's younger sister, barely lifted her head. Her fingers clutched a silver bracelet, a gift from Claire on her 18th birthday. The jury took only 3 hours to make a decision, 3 hours to determine that Amelia Carson would never be free again. On April 26, 2012, the verdict was announced. Guilty. There were no screams, no protests, not a single reaction from Amelia. When the words echoed in the courtroom, while the crowd murmured in shock, while Claire's sister sobbed, while Daniel's mother covered her face with trembling hands, Amelia didn't cry, didn't speak, didn't move. Her lack of emotion was the last mystery of the case. Did she regret it? Did she feel remorse? Did she wish she had turned around and continued with her life, or did she still believe Daniel deserved to die for what he had done to her? The sentence was swift. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Camera flashes went off when they took her out of the room. But Amelia never looked up. She never turned to see the faces of the people she had shattered. She never looked at Melissa Whitmore, who cried silently. She never acknowledged the family of the man she once swore to love. She walked through the courthouse doors and disappeared. The woman who had spent years fighting for Daniel's love would now spend the rest of her life in a cell. Forgotten. The Honeymoon murder case became one of the most infamous of the decade. It was told in documentaries, true crime shows, and books. Some debated whether Amelia Carson was a ruthless killer or a woman broken by heartbreak. But for those who lost Daniel and Claire, there were no doubts. For them, justice had been served because for Daniel and Claire, forever only lasted 2 weeks. For Amelia Carson, it would last a lifetime behind bars. The cell where Amelia Carson would spend the rest of her life was barely 3 meters wide. The cold gray concrete walls were the last thing she would see each night before closing her eyes, and the first thing she would find upon waking. In the months following the trial, the world continued to debate her story. Television programs, articles, and internet forums analyzed every detail of the case, dissected her past, tried to decipher whether she had been a scorned woman or simply a remorseless killer. But in prison there were no debates or theories, only routine. Each morning she woke to the metallic sound of doors opening and closing in the corridors. She didn't speak to anyone. She had no visitors. She didn't write letters or make calls. The woman who had once crossed the lobby of the Ivory Sun Resort with determination now spent her days sitting on the edge of a narrow bed, watching the empty wall in front of her. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for anything. She showed no signs of remorse or anger. She just existed, trapped in a silence she didn't break, even when the guards spoke her name. The prison record described her behavior as quiet but disturbing. Some inmates tried to talk to her in the first few months, curious about the story of the woman who had killed her ex-boyfriend and his wife on their honeymoon. But Amelia didn't respond. She showed no interest in others or in herself. When allowed out into the yard, she walked in circles with no apparent direction, her gaze fixed on the ground. She never looked at the sky. During the early years, journalists tried to secure an interview. They wanted to be the first to hear from her own mouth the reasons behind the crime. But Amelia rejected every request. She had no interest in telling her version, in justifying what she had done, or in refuting what was said about her. The only time anyone heard her say anything was when a new inmate, unaware of her story, asked her what she was doing there. Amelia looked up for the first time in months, fixed her eyes on her, and replied in a neutral voice. "He promised me forever." Years passed, and the world forgot about Amelia Carson. Her story was no longer a media obsession. There were no more headlines about her. No documentaries, no debates on internet forums. People found new crimes to talk about, new scandals to discuss. Her name was filed away in books of solved cases, in old episodes of true crime shows that some casual viewer might find in a late-night rerun. In prison, time ceased to have meaning. There were no more photos of Claire smiling on the beach. No wine glasses clinking at elegant dinners. No messages from Daniel promising things he would never fulfill. Just the echo of footsteps in the corridors, the sound of keys turning in locks, and the monotonous murmur of other inmates oblivious to the story that once made the whole world pronounce the name Amelia Carson. And one day, without warning, she stopped walking in circles. She stopped going out to the yard. She stopped getting out of bed when the guards found her. Her body was cold and still, her hands interlaced over her stomach, her eyes closed as if she were asleep. There was no note. There was no goodbye. The news mentioned her death in a small footnote. There were no theories, no unanswered questions. No one discussed whether it was intentional or if her own body simply decided to give up after years of confinement. All that remained was a line in the official prison report. Written without emphasis, without emotion, without acknowledgement of what her story had been before those gray walls. Inmate 44,892-1. Deceased. Case closed. Amelia Carson's body was removed from the cell in silence. There were no cries, no farewells, no ceremony to mark her departure. No relative claimed her body. No friend sent flowers for the outside world. Her story had ended long ago. The prison officials simply followed protocol. A routine autopsy confirmed the obvious. Her heart had simply stopped. There were no signs of violence or traces of poison or drugs. She had left no letter, but she didn't need to. Amelia Carson had been forgotten long before she died. Her body was buried in an anonymous cemetery in an unmarked grave. Only an identification number engraved on a small metal plate marked the spot. There was no memorial service, no words in her honor. The only person present at the burial was the official who signed the transfer papers. Thousands of miles away, life continued for the families of Daniel and Claire Whitmore. Daniel's parents never filled the void left by his death, but over time they learned to move forward, finding comfort in memories of their son before Amelia. Melissa Whitmore, Claire's younger sister, married years later and carried with her the last gift her sister had given her, a silver bracelet she never took off. The media stopped talking about the Honeymoon murders. Social networks, which had once turned the case into a global obsession, no longer mentioned her name. The story of love, betrayal, and revenge that had captured the attention of millions ended up as a forgotten file in the database of closed cases. The Ivory Sun Resort and Spa in Cape Town continued to receive tourists, as always. Newlywed still booked Suite 417 without knowing that years earlier that room had witnessed a story of death. Over time, the resort was remodeled, the furniture replaced, the walls repainted. Not a single sign remained of what had happened there. But somewhere in the world, in some conversation between strangers in a bar or in a story told on a sleepless night, someone would mention the case. A random phrase, a vague memory of what was once an international scandal. Remember the woman who poisoned her ex-boyfriend and his wife on their honeymoon? And someone would respond with an indifferent gesture, with a shrug. Oh yeah, what was her name? But no one would remember. No one would say her name. Amelia Carson had disappeared. Not with a cry, nor with a plea, but with absolute silence. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. What sentence would you have given her? Leave me a comment and I'll read it. Enjoy life because you only have one. Love you, the detective. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like this video for more true crime video. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Take care and see you in the next video.